Good morning. We will call to order the Fire Board, Truckee Meadows Fire Board for, excuse me, hold on 1 minute. Yes. Hi. Do this again. We will call to order the Fire Board for Tuesday, September 18th. That was Commissioner Jung, and she is on her way. She'll be in just shortly. She didn't get a ticky, no. And with that, we will ask our district attorney to please lead us in the salute to the flag. Mr. Wattsville is so good at this.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Wattsville. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, ma'am. Marsha Burke Bidler, Chair.
Here.
Katie Jung, Vice Chair, on her way. Bob Lucy. Vaughn Hartung.
Present.
And Jeannie Herman is absent. Madam, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will go to public comment. Mr. Chief.
Item 3 is public comment. Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Board of Fire Commissioners' agenda. The district will also hear public comment during individual action items with comment limited to 3 minutes per person.
Okay, I see no one listed. Do you have anyone, Madam Clerk?
I have nobody listed.
Okay, super. We will close public comment and move on to item 4. Chief.
Item 4 is Commissioner Fire Chief's announcements, requests for information, topics for future agendas, and statements relating to items not on the agenda.
Do you have anything to add, Chief?
I do have one item, Madam Chair. I need to pull item number 13, which is the district's health plan. The union has not had time to act on this item, so we want to hear from the union before the board acts. So we will pull it and bring it back in October.
Okay. All right. So with that, Commissioners, I see no one signed in. Does anybody have anything they want to comment on or add? Okay, so we will close number 4 and move on to the consent items. So Chief, you have any changes you want to see on the consent items?
No, Madam Chair.
Commissioners, have you had anything on the consent item you see you think needs to be pulled? Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And I don't think we vote on the screen on this one, but
No. Okay.
do approve your, will it show up? Yes. Okay, the motion carries. Actually, technically, Commissioner Jung isn't here, so it's 3-0 with both Commissioner Jung and Commissioner Herman absent for the moment. Okay, so with that, we will move on to item 6.
Item 6 is the IAFF Local 2487 report. I do not see anyone from the union here to present.
Okay, so no one will be making that, all right?
Item 7 is Fire Prevention Month proclamation, and Chief Beaver will present our proclamation.
Okay.
As you all know, Fire Prevention Month, first time in front of you, so it's kind of exciting. Anyway, sorry. Lisa Beaver, Deputy Chief, Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. As you know, October is our Fire Prevention Month. So with that being said, the subject is look, listen, and learn. Be aware, because fire can happen anywhere. So with that being said, I would like to ask the Commission to adopt a proclamation that I will read to you here right now.
Thank you.
Okay. So whereas Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District Board of Fire Commissioners are committed to ensuring the safety and security of all of those living in and visiting our county, and whereas all Washoe County residents should identify places in their home and in their community where fires can start and eliminate those hazards, and whereas residents should install smoke alarms in every sleeping room, outside each separate sleeping area, and on every level of the home, and whereas residents should listen for the sound of the smoke alarm, and when it sounds, respond by going outside immediately to the designated meeting place. Whereas residents who have planned and practiced a home fire escape plan are more prepared and will therefore be more likely to survive a fire. And whereas residents are responsive to the public education measures and are able to take action to increase their safety from fire, especially in their homes and community. And whereas the 2018 Fire Prevention Week theme, Look, Listen, Learn, Be Aware, Fire Can Happen Anywhere, effectively serves to remind us that we need to take personal steps to increase our safety from fire not only in our homes, but in our community. So therefore, the Board of Fire Commissioners does hereby proclaim October 2018 as Fire Prevention Month and urges all people of Washoe County to be aware of their surroundings, look for available ways out in the event of fire or other emergency, respond when the smoke alarm sounds by exiting the building immediately, and to support public safety activities and efforts of Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District's fire and emergency services during Fire Prevention Month.
Thank you very much. And with that, I would just say that, Chief, your article and It's Your Turn this morning was excellent. I think it pointed out to the need for all of us to be fire aware, as well as all the fire issues we're dealing with in the last couple of years. So thank you very much. I'm looking for a motion to approve the proclamation.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the proclamation. Any other comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public comment. We forgot to ask for public comment. So is there, I see no public comment on my list. Is there any public comment, Madam Clerk? Okay. For the record, we have asked for public comment on the proclamation. Please cast your vote on the screen. And please note for the record that Commissioner Jung has arrived. Motion passes 4-0 with Commissioner Herman absent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam.
Don't go anywhere, Chief. You're going to do the next one, too. Madam Chair, item 8 is discussion and acceptance of a grant award of 100 smoke alarms from First Alert Fire Safety Community Service Project supporting Truckee Meadows Fire Protection Fire Prevention Division, and approve a resolution of the same directing staff to make the necessary budget adjustments.
Okay.
So, with volunteer Randy Hunwell from one of our volunteer stations was working with Truckee Meadows Community College and actually achieved a donation from First Alert of 100 smoke alarms to be installed in homes. And so I wanted to kind of brief, this kind of aligns with our Prevention Week plan that we have. We have actually, right now, for our Prevention Week, we're going to be utilizing 4 stations, Station 17, Station 15, Station 33, and Station 35. As on October 13th is going to be having an open house in which the smoke alarms are going to be divided evenly among those stations. So the public will be coming to the station and learning the message about look, listen, learn. Be aware, fire can happen anywhere. One of the things that we've done in addition to that is we've added not only with being aware of your home, but being aware of your community. As you well know, we've had the Perry fire. We couldn't have done what we did through the investigation avenue without the public help. So this is where we want to engage the public to be more of our partner in order to help us. Be aware of your surroundings. If you see someone coming out of an area of a fire, take note, let us know. So we want to also add that to community awareness. So the smoke alarms would be, if the public comes into the station, they would request, if you don't have a smoke alarm that's working or you have it missing, then we're going to be providing them to them for them to install in their home. Okay. In addition to that, just to add on to the Prevention Week, as these stations do this outreach, we've also purchased some emergency preparedness go bags that we're going to have them fill out raffle tickets, and then we're going to do a raffle draw and actually give away 5 emergency preparedness go bags to community members to help them be additionally prepared. So, okay. So with that being said, I would like the commissioners to approve acceptance of the donation of 100 smoke alarms from First Alert for us to utilize in our Prevention Week program.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any public comment? I see none listed. So no public comment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And please cast your vote on the screen and affirm your vote above. Motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Herman absent. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Chief, your report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 9 is the fire chief's report for discussion only. Operational summaries, the clerk is going to hand out April summaries. What I've taken some time is making the graphs a lot more simple and the information a lot more readable. I'd like your input on at least April, and then in October we'll get you caught up from May to September.
Okay.
So they'll be coming your way. Wanted to report on the meeting that we had with the Verdi community recently, and we had Michael Beaudoin of NDF and Chief Brown talk about starting a fire adaptive community program. As well attended, about 70 people there, and they're very interested in starting that. The fire adaptive community will be helping develop a community-wide fire protection plan, CWPP, and from that we'll be able to establish some grants. Michael Beaudoin of NDF has told me that there's a substantial grant available that we can apply for in November, and our intent is to apply for funds for that, specifically for the Verdi community. And we can target things like the water cisterns that we've talked about. We can talk about a specific green waste. We have a lot of senior citizens in Verdi who would otherwise like to do harvesting of their green waste and thinning out their vegetation, but they don't have the financial means nor the physical means to be able to do that heavy lifting. So we plan to do that during the green waste anyway, but this grant would be a significant effort towards improving the quality of defensible space in Verdi specifically, because it's one of the areas where I'm very, very concerned about in terms of the vegetation. We have some sagebrush that's over 30 years old. It's as tall as I am, and it needs to be thinned and harvested. So with that, we're going to make substantial progress, I believe, in projects for Verdi in the coming year and 2 years.
Question, Madam Chair.
Vice Chair Jung is
Oh, I'm
on
sorry, I
first,
apologize, Madam Chair.
and then I'll,
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. You know, Chief, in terms of needing people to help clear out the brush, et cetera, not only in Verdi, but in other areas because of people that are too elderly or disabled to do it, I know that you could partner through Job Corps, Sierra Nevada Job Corps. They do, Christina Conti's an expert on this as well. They do lots of community outreach and volunteerism, and we work together there. And they have to do so many hours for their leadership roles, et cetera. So I would, you know, and I mean, she could tell you just as easily, buy them a nice piece of pizza and a soda, and they're the happiest kids in the world because they live right there on campus. So I can help you reach out as well as Christina, because I think we could get them to get out there and clean up some of that brush for people that can't do it. When we did the big revitalization of 9th and Sutro, and that whole little neighborhood there, Job Corps was out there painting houses, painting fences, because we found out that like 90% of the homes there are owner occupied, just disabled or elderly and not able to keep up. So they have a long tradition of doing that in our community. So I'd be happy to help you connect that.
Very good, thank you.
it's
Thank
a
you.
great idea. Commissioner, thank you, Vice Chair Jung. Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Chief, and I'm not trying to say that there isn't a need in Verdi, but there's certainly a need in Spanish Springs. There's a number of places where people just need help. Sun Valley, Commissioner Lucy's district, Washoe Valley, up on the Mount Rose Highway. There's some real need. So I'm hoping that we can come up with more of a community-wide effort. It's a good place to start in Verdi, but I'd like to see it, pun intended, branch.
This program has become so entirely successful, we're even having difficulty masticating all of the material that came in with our little Bobcat.
Yes.
We've reached out to some contractors to ask if they have heavy machinery that could do the work. And we just simply can't process it all. In fact, we still have piles left over from the last green waste that we need to get rid of before we start this in again in November. So if we can find a contractor, that will certainly help, or the district may need to invest in heavy equipment, something bigger than what we have to be able to process it all. NDF also has inmate crews that can help us do some of the heavy lifting as well. So
As long as
between-
it's not on private property, is that correct, Chief? Because they can't, once we get it off of private property,
Correct.
right? Okay.
Good.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You bet.
Thank you, Chief.
And so item 4, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped item 3, the Tumwa hydrant maintenance agreement. Legal counsel has given me some comments on the agreement, and I forwarded those to Tumwa. I'm just waiting here to hear back from Tumwa, and I believe that this should be ready by October, November to approve, and they'll get started with hydrant maintenance in January.
Okay, Commissioner Hartung?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Have we had any conversations, Chief, with Great Basin Water Service, specifically for Cold Springs and in Spanish Springs?
I have
doing hydrant maintenance. I actually have inkled to them that needs to occur, so perhaps you and I can meet with them and just have that conversation. Because
Certainly.
I think that there's some responsibility on their part. Those hydrants are essentially pieces of their infrastructure.
The plan for this fall is that staff is doing it for the last time, and Chief Beaver is heading up the hydrant maintenance program. So those hydrants that are within a private system, the property owners or the water company will need to test those.
Yes.
Tumwa will test the public accessible hydrants, and we will do whatever might be miscellaneous. So it should be fairly few.
And if I may, you know, the reason for me pushing this at Tumwa is there's a couple of reasons. One, I believe that although firefighters are capable, they're not. That's not what they do for a living, is handle those heavy pieces of infrastructure. It's just that simple. And on the other side, Tumwa likes to have things a certain way. They're very particular. Tumwa's very, very well managed, and our infrastructure, it was a great benefit, believe it or not, to Tumwa, because fire services, this is not Truckee Meadows, fire services elsewhere would go out and they'd purge those hydrants. Well, then all of a sudden, Tumwa would get a dozen or more calls that my water is rusty. And, you know, what's going on? And so then Tumwa would work backwards and say, okay, well, you know, we had a fire crew out purging fire hydrants. So it really is incumbent upon Tumwa as the water purveyor to perform those kinds of functions so that they can work in concert with their customers. And so I think that it's going to work out great, and I think it's just a matter of time before we get, and I don't know, how do we handle things in Sun Valley, Chief? What happens with the hydrants up there? Does Sun Valley GID do them, or?
No, we are testing those.
We are testing those as well, okay? Okay, deeper conversations. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. You know, one other question, Chief, quickly, as long as we're talking hydrants, what about in Lemon Valley? I know we had a discussion by text about one that has a sign on it that says out of order, and I don't know if that's ours or Reno's or...
My staff has told me that it's in our jurisdiction, but it's not the hydrant that's broken, it's the street valve. So we have referred that to Tumwa for repair, and apparently has maybe slipped off
Okay,
somebody's
good.
list, but nevertheless, we've communicated that with Tumwa.
So, if I may, Madam
Certainly,
Please.
Commissioner Hartung.
Chief, will you send me a quick note on that when we're done here today, and I will follow up with Tumwa?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. Okay, Chief.
Item 4, green waste. I just wanted to announce that we'll be looking at 3 weekends in November to do the voluntary processing of green waste. One certainly in Verdi, one in the north and one in the south like we did last year. I'll announce those dates fairly soon in early October so people have a chance to get ready for those and earmark those weekends.
Okay.
Item 5, regional fire issues. We've been having continued discussions about dispatch, and I'm somewhat encouraged now that from what I hear from the group. REMSA, City of Reno, City of Sparks, and TM and the county have been participating in discussions on how to create better efficiencies within the dispatch system. I believe we're in agreement now that the first step needs to be to create virtual dispatch, and a consolidated dispatch would then follow at some future point. So virtual dispatch is simply eliminating having to pick up the phone from Washoe County Dispatch to call REMSA or to call whoever with that information, rather than the information will populate immediately on the dispatcher's screen. And so what REMSA types in their CAD will appear on our dispatcher's CAD and vice versa. So we'll be able to share information virtually and immediately. That's going to help us immensely in cutting down the reflex time. Even when we call mutual aid for say, the city of Reno, there can be as much as a 2-minute to 5-minute delay in that request, which almost negates, it does negate the fact that we're doing automatic aid in some areas. So the technology is being tested this week. We'll continue to test during the month. And hopefully there's going to be a rollout of CAD to CAD very, very soon to where that inefficiency is going to disappear. Then what will follow is a need for some policy discussions among the board to the various agencies on how you actually want to expand, if you want to expand automatic aid, to include some critical medical calls, which is why I've advocated for an improvement in dispatch in the first place, because we've had serious medical emergencies not very far away from a station, but they've never been dispatched. So the policy question that the board's going to have to address is, do we want to always do all calls? Do we want to limit it to certain emergencies? And what I hear from my peers at the city of Reno is the city may still have some issues with respect to the crew size. Well, we've eliminated that in Verdi because we're running a crew of 4, but yet we're still closer to most of the city of Reno and Verdi. So I bring this up because we need to do a balance of trade study so that we can look at the historical calls and understand that if you make a policy decision to say we want to respond as closest unit in all cases, what does that do for our call volume as an agency and everybody else? Because as you see in my chief's report, we're responding into the city of Sparks 10 times for every 1 call that they're responding to us. I don't have a problem with that because the city of Sparks is always there for us when we have a structure fire in Spanish Springs and Sun Valley. So we're getting, I think, a high boost in the effective firefighting force from the city of Sparks when we have critical calls that are infrequent, but nevertheless important to have additional resources show up. So these things are progressing, and I'm very, very encouraged that we're making some progress. And the next thing will be is AVL. So after we figure out the CAD to CAD, then the policies of AVL and how we dispatch will need to be discussed at the policy level.
Good. Commissioner Hartung?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Madam Chair witnessed herself, the City of Reno does not always respond with a 4-person crew. And I fail to see the relationship when someone responds to an emergency. If a family member of mine had a heart attack, I would rather have a 3-person, I'd rather have a 2-person crew. I'd rather have 1 person show up who can assist and help me at that very moment until the troops could arrive. I fail to see how that plays. I'm just so sorry that this has come to this position, because when people need help, that those precious few minutes can truly matter. Mm-hmm. It can make all the difference in the world. And so I'm a little vexed. And Chief, and again, this is why I'm hoping that we'll come as a board together and talk more robustly about how flex crews can change the whole dynamic of what's going on, because we would respond with a smaller crew initially and then more if needed. If needed. And I have heard reports where someone who was inebriated fell off of a bar stool at one of the clubs, and a ladder truck showed up to assist them, plus Remza, plus all the people in the club, and there were a total of 9 or 10 people there. And it was truly not an emergency of that magnitude. Remza could have handled it and did handle it easily on their own. So I'm vexed, and I'm sorry that this has become a point of contention between two corps, and we haven't made it about the citizens of Washoe County as a whole and how we can respond to them faster and better. Thank you.
Good points, very valid points. Chief, I'm curious about timing. Do you have a sense of how soon we can get the virtual dispatch, if you will, up and running? It would seem in this day and age, virtual dispatch should be relatively simple to do. Do we think we can have this in place by the end of this year and then start moving forward to something else, or are we still?
I believe CAD to CAD would be ready by the end of the year, and so that we're not casting blame on any of the agencies that participate in public safety. The slowdown has really been with Tiburon and the software company I just bought. The name escapes me. It's the one that Remza uses, but they're both the same now. So it's making CAD to CAD a whole lot simpler.
Is it Tiburon?
It's Tiburon and Tritech. So the software is being developed. They are developing it on their timetable, not ours. But nevertheless, it's progressing, and so it's being tested, and then I think a rollout by the end of the year is certainly reasonable.
Thank you, Chief. I think this is an issue that we really need to do as much as we can in a positive move forward manner, largely because we have a legislative session coming up this next year, and we already know there's going to be some legislation relating to fire services in Washoe County, and I think it behooves us and it benefits the legislators from Northern Nevada if they see we're really working forward in a positive manner on this in the best way to serve the citizens, as Commissioner Hartung indicated. So, thank you, Chief.
Madam Chair, item 6 is discussion of wildland season, and if I may have the maps on the big board, but you also
that.
have maps in front of you that show just how many acres have burned in Washoe County in 2016 to 2018. It's a fairly significant amount of land that is burned. It has been almost oppressive in terms of its demand on our local resources and also regional resources. And on the other page is the 2018 fire season, which of course you realize that we just had an 80-acre fire in Palomino Valley again through an accidental cause. So no matter, well, we need to continue the message of being very, very careful during this fire season because we have simply not had any precipitation. So we are going to be in a state of high fire danger until we do get precipitation and hopefully snow before not too long after October 31st. If there's any questions about any of the fires that we've fought lately, I'd be glad to answer those.
Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Hartung?
Comment, Madam Chair. Chief, to both you and the Corps, well done. I mean, I spotted the smoke from the Pioche fire and called the chief, and he had instant information and told me he was on his way out there, and that we had already begun to call in resources to take care of it. You guys have been, everybody has been just very responsive. And I mean, everybody's really just stepped up.
Thank you. That fire was one of the more difficult fires we've had to fight this season. Very, very steep terrain, boulders falling off of the slope towards firefighters who had to dodge it. 10 helicopters, 10 engines. We had 4 single-engine aircraft tankers, which are what is depicted on the screen, and it is those aircraft that probably saved that fire from going into the flats in Palomino Valley. They got there just in the amount of time because it was just headed for the flat areas of Palomino Valley, and that was our worst nightmare. We actually had ordered a very large aircraft tanker, which is the largest one, 60,000 gallons fire retardant, and we ordered it. It hadn't launched yet, but when the seats showed up, we were able to box that fire in and keep it contained. So my compliments to Chief Heike, who was the operational commander on that, did a very good job. This fire is in 100% of TM's jurisdiction and did not encroach on any federal lands, although we were assisted by Forest Service and BLM, City of Reno, City of Sparks, Carson City, and a whole host of other regional partners.
Thank you, Chief. You know, we sit over here in Nevada and we've had a lot of fires, and we've been fortunate that we've had very few structures burn. And it is true that we're vastly different than the community in Napa that burned, or the community in the hills of the foothills, or down in Los Angeles. But it is such a relief, I think, to the citizens, because I hear frequently from citizens that they are so happy that we have a great hands-on fire team, and that all the firefighters work as a team here to make sure that we don't have a catastrophic fire that burns immediately through the city of Reno and burns down homes, which is, you know, realistic. We live in fireland, so it could happen. So I do want to make sure that we pass that on constantly to our firefighters and to you, Chief, doing a great job. Commissioner Hartung?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, you're exactly right. Well done to the regional effort of everyone. City of Reno, City of Sparks, NDF, BLM. Those are regional efforts, and it amazes me how we can quickly muster the resources to deal with something of that magnitude, and yet we are still having a tough time with someone who has a heart attack. So I hope we can use that as an example of regional cooperation and how necessary it is.
Good.
Thank you.
You bet. Anything else, Chief?
Just item 9B, I'll let that, your dashboard stand unless there's any additional things you'd like to add. Nevertheless, I've added some comments as to status of each one of your items, and you certainly could let me know now or let me know after the meeting if there's additional items that need to be addressed.
Good. I actually had the opportunity to look at this, and although I do have to wear glasses these days because I can't seem to see anything, one thing that is not on here on mine is the discussion we had regarding, are you laughing at me not being able to see?
No, I misspoke on something, so I'm trying to backstep.
Okay, good. You're off the hook. Is actually an item that's on the agenda, and that's the extension of our fire fees to the North Valleys, to up towards Gerlach. So I see that on the agenda, so I'm glad to see that on here today. So I'm looking forward to that discussion.
All right.
Commissioners, anybody else with comments on the dashboard? Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
Chief
ma'am.
provided an overview presentation that I will distribute to the board and place on record.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, with that, we'll move on to item 10, Chief.
Item 10 is discussion and possible action to approve the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District to pay workers' compensation heart and lung claims. Invoice dated July 23rd, 2018 from the City of Reno in the amount not to exceed $35,792.90 per the Reno TMFPD interlocal, subject to review by our independent actuary, and this is for possible action. I'll ask Cindy Vance to
I don't need a
answer any questions. if you
motion
have
to
any.
approve.
All right, no questions yet. We have a motion and a second. Please put it on the screen. Fawn, is it on the screen? Okay, motion,
I touched it.
we have a motion and a second. Do we have any public comment on this? I see none. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Okay, please cast your vote on the screen and then affirm your vote above, please. Motion carries 3-0 with both Commissioner Commissioner Herman and Vice Chair Jung are both absent. Thank you. Chief?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 11 is presentation, discussion, and possible direction to staff regarding a district facilities master plan to include existing fire stations and possible additional career and volunteer fire stations.
Okay.
So the methodology that I see in this study, and this is by no means a comprehensive start of this, but what this does is prioritize our needs first. Then we would follow by studying whether or not the fire stations are in the right location. Do we need future stations? Are the existing stations sited correctly? Could we eliminate fire stations based on perhaps a regional deployment? One of the things in the dashboard that you've tasked me with is to look at regional cooperation with City of Sparks and City of Reno to see if we could somehow share response areas, whether or not that's possible. And then finally to cost, and then figure out how we're going to finance and pay for those stations. So in this memo, clerk, they did get it? No? This one?
I will distribute this to the board now.
It's coming
Okay,
now.
thank you. Yeah, I think this is an excellent idea. Personally, I think master plans are always a good way to not establish the only thing we can do, but to establish the general guidelines for what we need to look at. So, yeah, I'm very much in favor of that. Commissioner Hartung?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. And so, Chief, I'm not getting off this box. Again, this is where I see flex crews having a huge benefit for us because they can move interjurisdictionally and can also allow response prior to even rolling an engine. Again, it's a much more nimble kind of a response. And so I think that there may be some lessons in terms of rather than having a fixed station, you have crews that are more mobile in certain areas. And REMSA has proven time and time again that they are fully capable of, and this is still vexing to me, that they're capable of predicting where things can happen. I don't know how it works, but I do know that it works. I've watched it in action, and I've had deep conversations with some of the uppers at REMSA, and it's really an amazing piece of software.
It could probably work for us in certain cases. The need for fixed facilities is driven by the insurance industry through ISO, and they're saying you need fire stations every so often in order to benefit from reduced insurance rates that aren't sky high. So if I may just go through briefly what my priorities are as chief, and certainly would like to hear from the board. But starting with Hidden Valley, we have a special use permit for that station that expires in 2021. It was to allow a modular building on that site. The reason why we put that station there in the first place is the city had canceled mutual aid with the district back in 2012, so we had to have a way of serving Hidden Valley, and that's really why that station came to be. As you look at the map, it's certainly fairly close to Reno Station 6 and Sparks Station 3, and one of the things we're going to have to talk about is, do we want to rebuild that station, or do we want to engage both jurisdictions in some sort of scheme to share responses? So if perhaps those two jurisdictions could cover Hidden Valley, we might be able to cover, say, Cold Springs or Verdi, for instance, and save the taxpayers a lot of money. If that's not possible, then Hidden Valley needs to be at least coming out of the ground by 2021.
Okay.
Got two possible sites for it. One is at the existing station, which would have to be raised and rebuilt, and the other is on a parcel owned by Washoe County off of Pembroke. Problem with that is it's both parcels. There's not a lot of choices in Hidden Valley, number one. Number two, the two parcels that we have identified are both in the floodplain. We can get Hidden Valley Fire Station out of the 100-year floodplain on Pembroke, but not out of the 500-year floodplain. If we were to rebuild here, it would stay in the 100-year floodplain. So I see that as a number one priority to start to work on. Number two.
Chief, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
On this. Has there been any discussion with the residents of Hidden Valley as to whether or not they feel their insurance rates are lower, having a station up there as well? I know the Reno station is relatively close, but still, if you've got a station right in Hidden Valley, is this impacting their insurance? And if we move it out of the valley, or we do a mutual aid agreement with the city of Reno, will they see an increase in their insurance rates? Because they do back up to open space, possibly wildfire that could burn I mean, that would be an odd direction for it to burn, but we do get winds from the east occasionally, so it could burn into their community. So I think as you look at this whole process, I think that's one of the things we need to take into consideration also.
Absolutely, that'll be part of the study phase as we get into this and looking at call volume, looking at locations, looking at the band of Sparks Engine 3 and Reno Engine 6 and how often they're in quarters. And there's a very sophisticated methodology that we'll use to give the board the data to make a decision on whether or not we go one way or the other.
Okay, Commissioner Lucy, I see you have, hang on just 1 minute, Chief.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I did want to bring up the challenges with Hidden Valley, but the other one we talked about, and something that might be brought up, I've brought up a number of times, is the challenges that we see with the moving of 14 further into town and off of the Demonte Ranch Parkway, and we moved that off of Foothill, which is better to serve a good majority of that district back in Holcomb Ranch, which it's always served. However, my concerns still lie out on the toll road area, also Mount Rose corridor as we move out into Pleasant Valley. Because those rural roads are narrow and longer, deeper into that area, we do have the station at East Lake that can come into service. We also have 14 or 36 that can come down, but it really does put, in my opinion, some troubled areas back there off of Toll Road, the back parts of Pleasant Valley on the east side there that really are lacking some access. There would be probably the most depth or the furthest distance away from any one of our stations in the South Valleys. So definitely would like to have something addressed as we continue to study the master plan for the facilities, that those areas are identified and really make sure that we're addressing any concerns out in that area.
So if I may
Certainly.
address Commissioner Lucy's question. So what we'll be studying is possibly a boundary drop with Carson City Fire. And for the same dispatch problems that plague us with the City of Reno and City of Sparks, that reflex time, they also exist with Carson City. We're in discussions with Carson City to help to talk about a boundary drop so that if we're closer to Carson City or they're closer to us based on AVL, we would be able to help each other out. So I mentioned that in that we may be able to possibly consolidate Station 30 and Station 16 in a better location, or perhaps move a volunteer resource, or perhaps add a station. There's a lot of options there, which the data, once we crunch it and present it to you, I think would give us a pretty good idea of what needs to be done there. And certainly, Engine 12 from the City of Reno can get in to Toll Road pretty fast. But again, that reflex time and dispatch negates that extra 2 minutes that they can get there faster because it takes 2 minutes to dispatch.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the great concerns, especially for those toll road residents in that that part of Pleasant Valley and Hidden, or what's considered that northern version of Pleasant Valley. There's some challenges back within there, and so we need to address some of that as we continue to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll go through the rest of these very quickly.
Okay.
Bowers Mansion, of course, is very old. It's actually not on land that we own. We lease it from the state of Nevada. It's in need of replacement, so as we consider whether or not we want to consolidate stations 16 and 30, whether that's a good idea, we'll let the data drive that decision. Maybe not. We may want to move 30 down a little bit closer to the south. Logistics and fleet maintenance. We're leasing our logistics facility for about $100,000 a year. And then the next one, admin, we're leasing our space from the county at $135,000 a year. So my contemplation is that rent could be transferred into debt service to pay for those two new buildings.
Okay.
And again, these are just the priorities that I have. Spanish Springs, my gut tells me it's in a pretty good location, but it needs to be updated with respect to finishes and interior. So we're probably not looking at a major construction on Station 17, but certainly something that would modernize it. And the volunteer stations, Verdi, basically a garage, no running water, no restrooms. So when they staff during a red flag event, it's just problematic. We have porta potties out back, and if they need running water, it's just not available, and it's just awful. So if we're going to have a good volunteer program, we need to have a better station there.
Yep.
And then finally, in Washoe Valley, I'm not sure that we need 2 volunteer stations, but also improving these stations is problematic because we don't own them. South Valleys owns them, and I can't see where we would allocate tax dollars to land in a station that we don't own. So I think that those 2 stations could be consolidated, but we would want to consolidate them perhaps with a new Station 30 or perhaps in a new location. So there's obviously a lot of facilities that these projects could take as much as 10 years to finally get done, but my purpose here in this presentation was prioritize them and take your input as we move into the next step, and that's study the actual locations and the data.
Okay. Any questions, commissioners?
No.
Any public comment? I see none signed in. Anything else, Chief?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Madam Chair, motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second to approve the chief's report and have him move forward on the regional plan, the master plan. So I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Please cast your vote on the screen and affirm your vote above. Motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Herman absent. Chief.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item number 12 is a presentation discussion on possible direction to staff regarding a possible district boundary adjustment to include Gerlach, Nevada, as outlined in the attached map at the request and direction of Commissioner Burt Bigler for possible action. So this came up in a slightly different form a few months ago, where I presented a possible boundary adjustment to the north to include portions of Palomino Valley that are not in the district's boundary, and also over to Red Rock. The county approached me about expanding the district boundary to include Gerlach, and I've drawn a map here that just artificially sets a new northern boundary a little bit north of Gerlach. And so what we've done in the staff report is study really the finances of what that's involved in. So under the CalCap arrangement that we have with the county, we pay the county for its services that it provides to the district, and the county provides us funds to cover north of Township 22, which is essentially a ready charge, and for all the other services that we provide fire prevention services in Gerlach. We provide some training and whatever support that the county requests for Gerlach out of that ready charge. So whether we have 1 fire or 1,000 fires, we respond north of Township 22 for that amount. So when you net that, and so if the premise is that the district would expand its boundary to the north, I've studied what would be the cost of the district. The county obviously knows how much it costs them. And so one of the problems for us is that there's a lot of federal land there which is not taxable, and a lot of tribal areas which are certainly not taxable. So the amount of revenue that would be derived from an expansion would only be about $300,000, and depending on the service level that the board would want to see, could range anywhere from $1.2 to $1.8 million for the district. So it's a significant amount of money for the district to expand the boundary there. In fact, because our revenues and expenses have now merged, we would have to deficit spend at least in the first or second year until revenues would catch up to that. So my concern is that if we were to expand there, it would compete against other things that you'd maybe want to do. Apple's coming down the I-80 corridor. We need to staff that station. That would be about $1.4 million. So I would ask the board to consider a lot of the future things that you have to do in addition to possibly serving Gerlach. I believe some of the solutions to Gerlach are probably include some help from Burning Man, because they are essentially one of the big reasons why we have to have a presence there. The other problem is Gerlach is just simply a very, very small community with 80 people, so spending in excess of $1 million is problematic for the county and for the district because the population is so small. But nevertheless, that amount of expenditure would cover everything north of Township 22, not just Gerlach. So it would include Red Rock and everything in between. So my intent here is just to present the impacts to the district's budget. And I believe the solution is going to be in some non-traditional ways of delivering fire service there. One of the things that makes it expensive for us is that our union contracts would overlap. So if we're hiring people in Gerlach, our cost of labor is just is a lot more expensive than, say, what the county is providing. So that's why our costs go up some.
So Chief, I have a couple of questions for you, and then Commissioner Hartung, I'll turn it to you. But I'm curious, there is a cost to the county in the $1 million range for providing that service, and unfortunately, our staff, although effective and doing a good job, are not fire staff. They're not fire trained. Our management are not fire trained, and so there may be ways that Truckee Meadows could handle it in a much more financially, in a better way, I guess is what I'm trying to say, than our team is doing. I think you can also still use the volunteer firefighters in Gerlach. I don't think that will change, and as far as equipment and everything, that's already up there. But let me ask you, you mentioned the Indian Nation lands and the federal lands. Aren't expanding our border to include everybody who lives in Red Rock and everybody who's north of 22 into our tax base, so it brings $300,000, that many of those people really need to be paying this anyway because you're already providing service to them. But aren't you already providing service to the Indian Nation lands and the federal lands when you're called to provide that service? It's not clear to me how that changes.
The answer is yes. With tribal, they have their own fire protection services, and so they are making an initial response, and we're quite often there on a mutual aid basis. With respect to BLM, yes, we're providing first response, but they're also providing mutual aid to us. So
Yes.
we have a very good relationship with BLM everywhere in our district.
But I guess my question to you, Chief, is this expansion really isn't going to impact that service that you're already providing anyway?
No.
Okay. So Commissioner Hartung, did you have a question?
Comment, Madam Chair. I sadly and it's difficult for us because we serve both the county and the fire board. So it's tough. But this has really come to pass because of Burning Man, 501c3, some 70,000 attendees. I did some basic math. My guess is that they net between $50 and $70 million a year. They had enough money to just buy Fly Ranch for cash. And now we are asking Washoe County citizens to cover them without substantial skin in the game. The 1.831 million that the chief has looked at, that's pocket change for Burning Man. I'm sorry. And I think that there are needs. I mean, we could go through station after station after station, starting out at Wadsworth and going to Lemon Valley and going to Verdi and going south and going north, and I mean all directions. So I have a tough time taxing and burdening the taxpayers in the whole of Washoe County to provide a service that we don't give the people who are even closer in. So Verdi doesn't have that same service, although they do have access. Wadsworth does not have that same service. We have an agreement with the tribe, but that's mostly still volunteer. I think that we need to come up with better solutions, and I'm sorry, I cannot, I would be a no vote to spend this kind of money out in Gerlach without huge amounts of participation from the Burning Man folks.
I don't think the issue, and I understand your concern. I don't think the issue, though, from my question was, we're already spending that kind of money. We're just spending it at the county level instead of the fire district level. So the money is being spent. And so the question, I think, is, would it be, does it, not that I don't agree that Burning Man should participate. I absolutely think that it would behoove us to sit down with the Burning Man team and see if we couldn't figure out some way to get them to participate in this whole process. I think that's a good idea. Hang on 1 minute, Chief. Vice Chair Jung.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Chief, so we're focusing on Gerlach, but if you change that boundary in terms of whom are responsible to pay towards the fire district, who else does that include?
All the slightly yellow parcels that you see on that map.
So,
The dark green's federal, the light yellow is private, and purple is tribal.
okay, so it'd be like Red Rock, right? Way out there, pretty good taxpayers in terms of what their property is worth, and people we are already subsidizing should there be an emergency. So it's not just Gerlach-centric. I think that's something we need to be very specific about. It's not just Burning Man-centric, and Burning Man is only there, I mean, arguably for a month. We have emergencies 24/7. And growth has always been said. Our wonderful regional planners say that growth should go to the north. Shouldn't we be preparing for growth in the north rather than waiting until we don't have time to plan? And I get your reticence because you're trying to be a good manager of our money, our profits and loss, but this is one of the most fundamental things that government provides to its citizens, which is public safety. So you're in a lucky position as well, because you get into a situation that this is not sustainable, you have us as a general fund. You don't stand completely alone. So that's why I've kind of go sideways during budget time when you hold so much money back, because the District Board of Health doesn't, frankly, because they don't need to, because they could still rely on us. We don't want them to, but it's really the best practices. So I think here what we need to think about is what's the right thing to do based on the growth. And then the other issue is Gerlach is progressively being bought up by burners, and they're going to expand up there. That's their mecca, so to speak, and be demanding even more. So I think we need to take a longer view on this. And right now, the county's spending, I don't know how much from the manager's office to provide less than satisfactory fire service. None of these people are professionals. And sorry, I think we should shift the cost burden and the tax collection to the experts, which is you. And I know we're not making any decisions today. This is just for us to throw all of our ideas against the wall, and you can come back and tell us what's your best, 3 options perhaps. But that's where I'm sitting at in terms of public safety, and I think it can be done, and I think it's a necessity that it gets done. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Jung. And I see Commissioner Lucy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Commissioner Jung brings forth a pretty interesting conversation. Chief, when we talk about the 1.83 million that you talk about here, the 2-person crew, 24-hour shifts, they would be located in Gerlach, correct?
Yes.
But the adjustment of the service area north past 22, the 22 township would include those in Red Rock that would start paying, as you pointed out on the map. So the service would provide for the individuals to be stationed in Gerlach, but would not be truly responding to that Palomino Valley, northern Palomino Valley, or Red Rock area, correct?
That crew would not. That response would still come from Station 17 in Spanish Springs, and to Red Rock, it would come from Station 18
Okay.
in Cold Springs.
Okay. So it would be a tax collection for that, but it would offset, try to offset with the additional individuals in the Gerlach area, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank
That's
you,
all I have for
Commissioner Lucy.
questions.
So, Chief, but you're already responding to Red Rock.
We do.
All of those people who live north of 22 are getting exactly the same services all of those people who live in the unincorporated county south of 22. And it is illogical to me that people who live in Washoe Valley are paying for a service that is being provided to people who are not paying for a service. And so I think maybe this is a two-part issue. The issue of it is time for us to expand our north boundary to include all unincorporated properties, and then let's work on the second part of the issue, work on with our staff, our county staff and you and your senior staff on what are we going to do about Gerlach, and how are we going to fix that problem? Seems to me this is a two-part issue, so perhaps if this is not up for action today other than to give direction. And so perhaps maybe the direction I would like to give, if this works for the other commissioners, is to ask you to bring this back as a two-part issue. And let's start moving forward with increasing our tax rate to cover those citizens who are currently getting the service exactly as the people in the south of 22 are getting in the unincorporated counties. And then at the same time, let's look at what can we do and how do we fix the problem. Perhaps the answer is that the county budget could provide a reduction in the cow cap or an additional, I don't know how that would happen, but I think it's a discussion that has to be had. I agree with Vice Chair Jung that we're at the stage now as we're looking at growth that we've really got to take into serious consideration where we're at. As an example, I think it's important to, it's very important to look at how are we providing service in Lemon Valley and Cold Springs and all of that area also, because I think all of those come into play in this whole picture. So we need to really look at that, and that's what I would ask you to bring back if you can do that, please.
Absolutely.
Okay, Commissioner Hartung?
Just perhaps a different thought process. Instead of two-part, how about just segmented, Chief, that we look at the different areas and segment them, and there might be more than two.
There
So-
might be, I don't know that, but.
No, I understand.
However,
That's-
it needs to be done.
That's what I'm suggesting.
Do we need a motion to, Mr. Westfield, do we need a motion to do that, or can we just give that direction?
You don't, making sure I'm on here, you don't specifically need to have a motion. If you
Okay.
have something that's super direct like that, you can. Otherwise, I think the chief has an idea of where the individual commissioners are going and can decide how
Okay.
best to proceed.
Super. So Chief, you, all right, good. Okay, go ahead.
Just briefly, one follow-up is I think one thing that the district can do is take over management of this area and relieve the emergency manager and the assistant county manager of the burden of trying to manage this. The cow cap is very vague. It says that the district will provide oversight, whatever that means. I think neither of my counterparts at the county nor I really know what that means. So we could modify that as a first step.
Okay, good. All right, anything further on this issue? Do we have any public comment on this issue? I see none on the screen. Okay. Anything further? We will close item 12, and we have pulled, the chief has pulled item 13 for a later agenda. But is there any public comment on item 13? Okay, we have no public comment, so we will move on to item 14, Chief.
Item 14 is possible closed session for the purpose of discussing labor issues of Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District, and staff does need a closed session
Okay.
with the board.
So we need, Mr. Watsfield.
Yes, Madam Chair, the board will need to make a motion to adjourn, reconvene in chambers, and then the meeting can be closed from there.
Okay. Okay. No, we'll do it later, yeah. Yeah.
Before adjournment.
Okay, item 15, Chief.
Item 15 is Commissioner Fire Chief's announcements, requests for information on topics for future agendas, and statements relating to items not on the agenda.
Do you have anything, Chief?
I would like to ask the board and Madam Chair if you'd like me to re-agenda legislative updates now that we're getting into the season. I think we did that 2 years ago, so I will, if with your permission, I will
Yes.
add that.
I think that's a good idea.
And finally, I wanted to announce that, oops, just spilled water all over the place. Our annual report was included in your board packets and is now available to the public digitally online and also a paper copy if they'd like.
Okay. Vice Chair Jung?
Thanks.
Yeah, this goes for this agenda and the Board of County Commissioners agenda. I think it's time, Mr. Manager, that we revisit the cow cap and what its function is, what it was supposed to do, what it has done, if it's clear. The cow cap was really a way that we were digging ourselves out of a terrible budget situation and finding a lot of waste and unaccountability from different departments. So I think it's a time we take a look at it again. If our fire chief is saying, I don't really understand it, we've got a problem with our cow cap. So let's bring that back and see how important it is and what we would continue to charge other departments and what we'll end up dropping based on a good fiscal analysis. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Jung. Commissioner Hartung. That age is getting me today, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief, I just wanted to note that I did notice the change of the logos on the fire engine, that they had been properly reversed. Whomever did the Photoshop work, well, it was not me, no, but I was happy to do it. If they would have asked, I would have done it fairly. It's an easy fix, quite frankly, but they did a good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. I have two things. When we were talking earlier about fire smoke alarms and that going to the fire stations, do we have a education program for children in schools where we go in, some of our team goes in and educates children on fire and then provides fire smoke alarms to the children? Do we have a program like that?
We do visit schools on a regular basis,
Okay.
not just during Fire Prevention Month and week, but we do that year-round, yes.
It would seem to me that some of our schools who are located in lower income communities would benefit if we were able to come up with a way to provide smoke alarms that they could then take home, because frequently those homes are not going to have smoke alarms in them. So I think that's something we might look at. And then second, I wanted, for the benefit of the Lemon Valley people who are here, it was brought to our attention that there's a fire hydrant that has a out of order sign on it, and I asked Chief to look into that, and his staff did. And for your information, the problem isn't the fire hydrant, the problem is the valve, Tumwa's valve in the ground, and it has been given to Tumwa's attention, and the chief is working, and his team are working with them to get that valve repaired so that that fire hydrant will be back up and running again. Just wanted to provide you that information since it was an issue. Okay, any other comments, commissioners? All right, we will move to the last public comment.
Item 16, public comment.
Okay, I have listed Ms. Tammy Holdstill.
Tammy Holtstill, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee for the record. I feel sorry for the chief due to the fact that this board approved a project last week that did not have his consent, deliberation, or anything else on it. There was a conflict of when the developer put in the project, he put it in as being serviced by the city of Reno, which is not true. And yet, these are the things that you as a board are not looking at before you approve something the way you did. It's time for you to start thinking about your staffs and how it being able to respond to the residents. We know that that Lemon Valley has had poor response times since the flooding. And that is your fault, not his. If you guys had taken action when you were supposed to take action back in January, February of 2017, we wouldn't be in the position we are in now. And then you selling out to a developer to elevate only one portion of Lemon Drive does not make any sense. There's a fire hydrant on Water Ash that has been wrapped up for almost a year now. That hasn't been addressed. Come on. It is your issues. And it's time for you as commissioners to do your fiduciary responsibility and do what is up there. It's time. You guys are useless. All you want to do is spend money where you want to spend money and not take care of what needs to be taken care of. And it is disgusting. Why should residents still have to, and he has to worry about flood response 2 years after the fact? 2 years. We have been in a flood response, and you guys took us out of the state of emergency. Why would that be? You didn't want somebody looking at your books, being the state. Otherwise, you want money, you would have stayed in the emergency response. So he could have gotten what he needed to do what he needed to do. Now you put more development out there and no place to put it. No fire department, no nothing, because you took away the volunteer fire department. So thank you.
Seeing no other public comment, we will close public comment, and we are adjourned.
Yeah.
We have to adjourn, we have to recess, actually. Technically, we're not adjourned. We are in recess, and we will do a labor session, and we will adjourn after final public comment at that time.
What?
After the next meeting.
Madam Chair, you
Yes,
need
sir.
to do that by motion.
And I need a motion for that? I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed. Motion carries. Yes, sir. Okay. Any public comment on the, any public comment on the motion that we just made to hold a labor session? I see none. So we are now in recess until we get back after the meeting.